What up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to episode number 46 of the Spun Today podcast. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz. Thank you very much in advance for listening to this episode. And it is a random rant episode, which is not going to be focused on the free writing like we normally do on here or any of that jazz. Just going to go over a few things, which include the following. In this episode, I speak about Jon Bones Jones' recent return to the Octagon in UFC 197 and his upcoming rematch with Daniel Cormier to unify the title, the light heavyweight title in the UFC. Conor McGregor's recent quote-unquote power play and negotiations with the UFC executives, and a few TV shows and movies that I've recently watched, being House of Cards on Netflix, Better Call Saul on AMC, Barbershop 3, Deadpool and Concussion. So stick around if you want to hear me randomly rant. See what I did there about those things. So, first off, Jon Bones Jones back in the UFC. Glad to see him back after, I think, like a year without fighting. Anybody who listens to this episode and is remotely a fan of the UFC knows that, aside from the fact that I've mentioned it in the past, Jon Bones Jones is probably pound for pound the best fighter ever. And, or the 100% top 3, top 2 even. And very, very, very arguably the best fighter ever. Next to the likes of like a GSP or Anderson Silva in his prime. And Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, absolutely. He's definitely one of those whose just skill level and martial arts abilities and just precision and movement and stuff like that are like super on point. And Jon Bones Jones is one of those dudes. And but he's a younger guy. He got into like trouble with drugs. No like performance enhancing shit. It was coke, if I'm not mistaken, and driving drunk and like stuff like that. I got a couple of DUIs, like crazy shit like that. I wound up getting into a car accident where according to him, he went through a red light, or a car hit him from behind. No, I think I'm mixing that story up with the fucking Bruce Jenner story. He got into a car accident basically, which was his fault. And the car that he hit was a pregnant woman. If I'm not mistaken, everybody was fine. But he did flee the scene. And according to him, and then wound up coming back to get his wallet and then leave again. According to him, he had done coke or was drinking or something like that, and he wasn't quote-unquote himself. Although that is probably a good depiction of what himself was at that point in time, at least. And he went back and just freaked out and thought that it would be best to leave or whatever. That's what he decided to do at that point in time. So that said, he wound up getting suspended from the UFC. He had legal troubles and issues. I don't think he got locked up. I think he was like in a jail or holding cell or something like that for a couple days, but wound up getting community service, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that though, because I could be off. But anyway, back to the point. He was not fighting in the UFC for a year, and recently came back in UFC 197. He was slated to fight for his belt because he was a champion at this point in time when he left, and he was slated to fight Daniel Cormier, which he had beat once before. Daniel Cormier was a very decorated Olympic wrestler. I believe gold medal winning Olympic wrestler, and was undefeated in the UFC, or maybe bronze medal. I don't know. Anyway, he was a fucking Olympic wrestler, and he was undefeated in the UFC. Many people said that he would be the guy to beat Jon Jones, and he lost. Jon Jones actually out wrestled him, which is weird because he does have a bit of a wrestling background, but nothing as, to the levels of Daniel Cormier. And John Jones took him down a bunch of times and pretty much dominated the entire fight and won in if it was split, I don't think it was split, it was probably unanimous, but could have been a split decision, but it did go to decision. And they have this very hateful rivalry between the two, because Daniel Cormier is like the I don't want to say goody two shoes, but he plays into that role of goody two shoes. And drugs are bad, and be a role model for kids, like that type of thing. And John Jones, obviously, given his colorful past, I guess, if you want to couch it that way, with drugs and alcohol and just DUIs and legal troubles and stuff like that, falls into the role of the bad guy. But everybody likes John Jones because he's just such a dope fighter. And so in interviews and stuff like that between the two, it's like really fun to watch. So anyway, John Jones beats him handily and retains his title, then goes through all this legal shit, gets dropped from the UFC, doesn't fight in a year. In that time, Daniel Cormier wins the interim belt for the light heavyweight title. So technically John Jones has never lost his title, definitely not to DC, Daniel Cormier. And Daniel Cormier in turn is now the champion, technically, because John Jones was out. So on John Jones's return in UFC 197, they were supposed to fight again, but DC got hurt in training, like I forget what it was, something with his foot, but fucked up something with his foot, fractured something that was going to put him out for several weeks. And John Jones fought OSP, Ovis St. Pierre, which is I think number 6 or 7 ranked light heavyweight or something like that. Everybody's pretty much calling it a tune-up fight for John Jones since he's been out for for a year. And it was a fight that he should have won handily, and he did win it. He did dominate, but not in like John Jones fashion. There were a couple moments there where OSP caught him good with some hits, but no, he was never in any like real danger throughout the fight. But it wasn't. John Jones is known also for like spectacular type finishes, whether they be knockouts or the way he beat my favorite all-time fighter, Lyoto Machida. He pretty much choked him out standing up against the cage, like in such a dope way. He choked him out like in a front-facing guillotine. I don't know. He had him like in a headlock kind of thing, and just they were both standing, and Lyoto Machida's back was pressed up against the cage. John Jones felt him go limp, and he pretty much choked him out. He let him go. He just let go and walked away like a fucking assassin. And Lyoto Machida was just knocked out. The ref didn't even know that he had passed out, and John Jones just choked him out and just dropped him right there and walked away. And so he's known for stuff like that, and like flying knees and spinning elbows and very crafty, creative, entertaining type of fights to watch. This fight in his return to UFC 197 was not that, but he did win. And many people are saying that if Daniel Cormier did actually fight him in his first fight back, that Daniel Cormier could have won, because it wasn't the usual dominating John Jones that we're used to seeing. But that is yet to be seen. And the moral of the story is that John Jones, now with Daniel Cormier feeling better, I guess, and healed up and shit, they are going to fight at UFC 200, which is being promoted to be the biggest UFC ever, and was definitely going to be, like, hands down, without a doubt, going to be, because Conor McGregor, the UFC's recent huge hype fucking machine in and of himself, was gonna make sure of that. And that brings me to my next point, little segue there, that the reason why John Jones and Daniel Cormier are going to fight at UFC 200, because they weren't going to before, is because Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, their second fight, which was going to headline UFC 200, is not going to happen. And so here's the deal with that, for those of you that don't know. Conor McGregor pretty much has been like I said, the UFC's like huge media soundbite machine, just churning out shit that the media wants and puts out, and has been promoting the fuck out of the UFC, and much to his benefit, as well, obviously the company's benefit, the promotion's benefit, but much to his benefit, because in the UFC, the way it works is that the fighters get paid not very much, and in comparison to like boxing or something like that. But fighters get paid a certain amount, and then the headliners, or the main card, I think it's all the main card, but the main card get a percentage of the pay-per-view buys, and like the headliner will get a higher percentage, the headlining fight will get a higher percentage than the co-headlining fight, and so forth. I think it's like tiered like that, and they make more from that percentage than they do from actually being paid. For example, I think Conor's like on paper was paid like $1 million or something like that to fight Nate Diaz the first time, but he cleared well over $10 million after his percentage breakdown with the pay-per-view buys. So it's like the fact that he's so good at promoting it, and that like the self-promotion thing, it's a benefit for the company and as well for him, because that's where he's making the bulk of his money. Now there's been recent controversy. People are calling it a power play, and there's people that fall on both sides of what I'm about to tell you guys, which is that Conor opted not to I guess live up to his obligations, contractual obligations, in terms of promoting the fight as much as the UFC would want him to. And he said that he's training and he doesn't want to take his mind off from training, and it's a serious fight for him, and he's like in Iceland somewhere training, and he's not going to fly to Vegas and then to New York, and then like 3 months away from when the fight is supposed to take place, and have to do press and all this draining media that he's been accustomed to as of late, that he has himself stated that it's fucking too much, and now it's beginning to interfere with my purpose of this whole thing, which is to fight and to be a martial artist, etc. So I'm not going to do it. And from his point of view, I guess he's looking at it like, I've made the most money than any other fighter for the UFC and for myself, and other motherfuckers need to step up and do more media, I guess, etc., etc. From the UFC standpoint, mainly, I'm not going to say mainly, but Dana White is the president of the UFC. He's a part owner of the UFC with the Fertitta brothers, and he is the figurehead as well. Not like in the literal sense, like he doesn't have any like real say, because he is an owner and the president of it, but he is the spokesman of it. You know what I mean? So figurehead in that sense. And from his standpoint, he says that fighters are contractually obligated to promote the fight. We are a promotion, and you can't, nobody's too big to do that, and like nobody's bigger than the actual company or thing itself, and that part of your job aside from fighting is to promote the fight. These are your promotional obligations, and if you don't want to do them, then you get pulled from the fight. People thought that he was bluffing, because when several people or analysts have broken down the numbers of the draw difference in terms of pay-per-view buys and stuff like that, by not allowing Conor McGregor to fight, the UFC is technically leaving an estimated $45 million on the table. And when Dana White said that he has to, go to Vegas or whatever and make it to that first promotional event or skirmish, or he's not going to be in UFC 200, then Conor tweeted out and made public, or made a Facebook post, I think, and said that what was it? Oh, I skipped a step, by the way. He tweeted one day that he was retiring young. He didn't say that he was retiring now. He just said retiring young. Most people took it as, okay, he's going to fight a few more times and then retire and still be relatively young, because I think he's not even 30 yet. He's like 27, 28 years old. Then the whole thing came with him now wanting to do the press, touring and shit. And and then Dana White said what he said for the UFC, and then Conor wound up tweeting out again, "I'm back in UFC 200." Shout out to Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta for putting together this fight and event for the fans that the fans want to see. And then the UFC pretty much said, we never said that he's back on, so we don't know what he's talking about, type of thing. And if he doesn't make it to Vegas, then he's officially out of the fight. Conor McGregor said he can't make it to Vegas, but he'll make it to the next one in New York, like a week or two later, or something like that. And the UFC said, all right, then you're out, basically. And you're not fighting in UFC 200. So they called his bluff, left an estimated $45 million on the table, and it is what it is. Now, here's my take on the situation. I say that, all right, there's certain fighters, like Rory McDonald, which is a very, like, a high-profile fighter, and I want to say, I forget his name, but something Johnson, which is another, not as high up there as Rory McDonald, who, has, like, fought for the title. He's like a number 1, 2, or 3 in his weight class. Who had that epic fight with Robbie Lawler, where Robbie Lawler's lip came out looking like a cleft lip, and Rory McDonald's face came out looking like a fucking Will Smith in what's that movie, Hitch, when he needs Benadryl and shit, and he's running through the fucking pharmacy and his face just blows up like that. That's how Roy's face looked after that fight. But an epic fucking fight. Anyway, though, a couple fighters have been siding with Conor McGregor and stating, and Conor McGregor's main, I guess, point here is that it's not fair for fighters who are paid to fight to be obligated to do all of this promotion and get pulled away from training and stuff like that, which a lot of fighters have said in the past. And these two fighters have sided, and probably others too, but these are two, the ones that I know, have sided with Conor and that type of mentality and thinking. There are other fighters that, side, like Cain Velasquez and Frank Mir, which I heard recently on Chael Sonnen's podcast. You're Welcome is the name of the podcast. Those of you that don't know, quick tangent here. Chael Sonnen was like the shit talking guru of the UFC, and just a big mouth promoter type of guy before Conor came along and just fucking eclipsed him. But he has his own podcast. He's had it for a while. I've never heard it before, but I recently started listening to it. I've heard like 3 episodes, I want to say, and it's pretty good. He gets like a bunch of fighters on there, and he's a good talker. He's a good bullshitter. He's entertaining to listen to, and does good interviews. So from what I've heard so far, which is a small sample size, but he Frank Mir on his podcast also had a very good point, and fighters like him and Cain Velasquez pretty much lean towards the side of the UFC, of the organization. Frank Mir had a great point of saying that he, just like other fighters, have always thought that the media obligations and promoting the fight were a bit much, and they always they feel like when they have to get pulled out of their training to do these weekends and radio show interviews and West Bubblefuck, where doing morning shows and like weird shit like that probably doesn't really sell the fight, that they don't feel good about that, but that Frank Mir said his only like saving grace was the fact that his opponent would have to do it too. So it kind of like evens out the playing field a little bit, but that it's part of the job. It comes with the territory. And my personal take on it is that this becoming a situation is important in the sense that it should force the UFC. I mean, I have absolutely no idea, obviously, what UFC contracts look like, but I would imagine that if something like this has been tested, if you want to call it that, by Conor McGregor or any other fighter, like Nate Diaz, I believe, was the only fighter to ever do it in UFC history, not, go out to do some promotional tours, and he got pulled from his fight back in the day. Or Nick Diaz, actually, which is the brother of Nate Diaz, the guy that just fought Conor McGregor for, which this was going to be the rematch for. If there's some sort of gray area, which is my assumption, because I don't see how, if something's in contract in writing, if you don't live up to it, I don't think it would become this big of a story if it was that. I believe there is probably some gray area within the contract, and this would help clarify those terms, and force, I guess, the UFC and fighters alike to come to agreements within the contract that aren't just, quote unquote, if this is the case, again, I'm speculating, quote unquote, as part of this fight that you're signing a contract for, you also have to do your media obligations or something like that. This should ultimately, like I said, force the two parties, being like the UFC executives and fighters, to come together and form, clearly defined roles of, okay, 8 weeks out from the fight, 0 media obligations. The weekend before, I'll do 5 hours worth or whatever the fuck, something that I would like to see something like that happen, so that a situation like this, in theory, can't happen again. You know what I mean? And if it does, it's very, very black and white, very easy to handle. You either meet the obligations of the contract or you don't. And if you don't fight. And if you don't fight, you don't get paid, like that type of thing. Or, you get penalized or whatever the case is. But something that's more clearly defined. I think leaving it gray and nuanced creates an environment where the possibility of something like this happening happens. So that's the positive side, as I see it, of the situation. The negative side is that, one, we don't get to see a rematch between Conor and Nate, which I would have really liked to see. And more so to that point, though, like where I stand on the situation, I would say that aside from being a bold, kind of necessary step, I think, in the whole, getting fighters more rights and unionizing, if you will, which is something that may come about from this type of situation, and like with the whole Reebok deal and a lot of fighters getting played and getting not getting their quote fair share of things, like in the interim while the UFC transitions into becoming a very huge type of sport, which in my opinion, like the long-term play of the Reebok deal is like a stepping stone in that direction. But unfortunately, the fighters that are fighting now are not benefiting from it, because they used to make more money from the smaller sponsors that used to pay directly to the fighters. And the Reebok deal pretty much squashed that, but it's a better look for the company as a whole, which now gets into like ESPN and stuff like that. And the next stepping stone, maybe like Nike deals and, bigger deals down the line, bigger money deals down the line for the company as a whole, which eventually should trickle down to the fighters. But right now, the fighters that are going through the transition period are getting fucked. So this type of situation, I guess, balances that a little bit and puts a little bit more bargaining chips on the side of the fighters, which is important for them and for like the balance of the sport. So I can definitely appreciate that aspect of it. However, in terms of the rule, like, it is what it is. Like, you're right now, it's not clearly defined. So it's kind of like the situation tips towards the favor of the UFC because it's not clearly defined. So it could kind of like say it is what it is, which it is. it's you have to do media obligations. These are your media obligations, and go do them. And so it takes balls for Conor to pull something like this, but he's the person with the leverage that could do it, so it's kind of like noble in the sense too. He's sitting pretty in terms of money, and he has the financial ability to do it. In that sense, he kind of has like the enough fuck you money to pull something like this and leave money on the table, to force this type of change to happen. But taking the situation in and of itself, aside from like that big picture, eventual effects or ramifications of this, the UFC is completely in the right. And how Dana White has said, it's not a popular decision, but it's the right decision. I agree with that 100%. You are a fighter. Part of being a fighter is promoting the fights that you're in, and parts of being part of the biggest fighting organization or biggest promoter, being the UFC, is making good on those media obligations. And you've taken it upon yourself, technically, Conor McGregor, to become this entity that the media craves and that the media puts in requests for. So the media requests Conor McGregor, and like Chael Sonnen said, with his funky suits and quirky accent, and that gives like these really awesome sound bites time and time again. The media puts in requests for certain fighters to interview certain fighters, and Conor McGregor gets the lion's share of those requests, just like Ronda Rousey did. And some people say she got burned out from that. And like all the big time fighters normally do get the lion's share of media requests, and Conor is just pushed that to like a whole different level. So, but technically, like I said, it's like a self-fulfilling type of prophecy. Did it for and to himself, kind of, and but much to his obvious benefit, and that's just part of it. So it's kind of like, I don't know if this is gonna make sense to anyone, especially if anyone that hasn't seen this comedy special, or hopefully you guys can follow me in making this connection here. But Sebastian Maniscalco, in one of his stand-up specials, he says something that I always like. I resonated so much with me, and I spoke about this before when I told you guys that I saw that special. But see if you can follow me on this one if you guys have seen it. Not gonna say the joke exactly, obviously, but he says something to the effect of being in ice cream like parlor, and people that ask for samples of like 13 different ice creams before they pick the one that they're gonna actually order, and they're with the little tiny sample spoons and stuff like that. And he says that he's not that type of person, that he's like, if he wants to try a different type of ice cream, he says, give me a cone of that, and afterwards when he eats it, if he doesn't like it, and then he says, yeah, I fucked up, but it is what it is. So I kind of like in that type of mentality to how I feel about Conor McGregor's situation. So it's like, you became this monumental behemoth fucking fighter that was able to promote the UFC to like new levels, and your paychecks have warranted it and all that, and now it's gotten to a point where it's fucking with your training and stuff like that, which is like counterintuitive, because it's kind of like it's what got you to the dance type of thing, so you don't want it to encroach in that. But yeah, you fucked up, you know what I mean? Like in that, like that type of mentality. Like, it's not like fucked up, but it's kind of like you reap what you sow, or you sow what you reap. What's that saying? You reap what you sow. That's how it goes. And yeah, it's just part of it. You got to roll with it for now. And by doing what you're doing, it is admirable, and hopefully it does create the type of change where it can spawn a type of environment where the fighters don't have to promote as much, or just use their, maybe they could leverage their like Twitter followers or something like that. Like someone like a Kevin Hart, I've heard, does that with his movies, where he would ink a deal for a movie, and then the producers of the movie would say, okay, and you have 45 million followers on Twitter, you can tweet the movie as well, which will help it do better numbers. And Kevin Hart was like, hey, espérate, that's not part of this deal. Like, I inked this deal to act in this movie. If you want my 45 million Twitter followers, we got to go back to the table and negotiate something else, because that's separate. That's mine. You don't automatically get that from me, which is a smart type of play for fighters that are able to leverage that type of thing. Maybe that's something they could say, you know what, I have to promote, I don't know, fucking 10 hours a weekend or something like that, but I have 10 million followers on Twitter. If I tweet to them a few things, how many hours less can I, how many hours of that 10 can I minus off so I could focus more on training? I don't know what the fucking best way to calculate that shit out would be, but you guys get what I'm saying, right? There should be different ways to be able to accommodate and achieve the same goal. And yeah, that's how I feel about that. Jesus, I've been talking for half an hour already. I didn't think I was going to speak that much on that. All right, so let's get to TV shows and movies, and I'm going to make this kind of quick because I wasn't planning on this episode being so long. I'm going to try to make it quick, but I'm fucking long-winded as fuck. And let's see, let's go through it. So I got 2 shows and 3 movies to mention. House of Cards, such a fucking amazing show. I love politics. I love the peeking behind the curtain sense that the show gives you. House of Cards is beautifully written. It's if you guys haven't seen it, it's about Congress and now the presidency and the state senate, and just like that federal level of government and the underhanded backdoor deals that they speculate happened throughout down there in dysfunctional Washington DC. And Kevin Spacey is just an amazing actor. And there are I forget her name, but Jenny from Forrest Gump, she's awesome too. And there's a slew of other like dope characters and characters with depth and the writer guy, he's back in this season also. Which was a guy that I think I mentioned to you guys that I saw in the subway in New York City and walked by him. He was also in Boardwalk Empire, and he has a really dope character. I really like his character, probably because I fancy myself a writer, and he plays a writer on the show. And I forget his fucking name though. Paul Sparks. There you go. He played Mickey Doyle in Boardwalk Empire, and he is in House of Cards as well. This season, each season just gets better and better. It's Netflix is just doing amazing shit with the shows that I've seen on Netflix, and like their Netflix originals. And House of Cards is definitely my top favorite one on there. And this last season, I am not done with it, so I'm not gonna spoil anything for any of you. But it is really dope, and I think I'm like 3 or 4 episodes out from being finished with it. So definitely check that out if you guys haven't already. So dope. Recommend it a lot. Next up, Better Call Saul. What a dopely written show as well. Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould, creators and writers of Breaking Bad, which is arguably one of the greatest shows of all time, up there with The Wire and like The Sopranos. Better Call Saul is a spin-off show of that, and I started watching Better Call Saul just off the strength of how good Breaking Bad was and the respect for that show. And Better Call Saul just became its own thing instantly and draws you right in. And that's in my, again, guys, I'm biased with writing. I think everything is writing, which not think, everything really is writing. But you know, obviously you have the elements of direction and the actual acting that is put into TV shows and movies and stuff like that. But I think that I think you can have shitty acting and direction with excellent writing and still be able to appreciate like a project. Whereas if you have shitty writing with really good acting and directing, you don't necessarily get to that same place. So I think writing is everything, or enough of it to be said to be everything. And obviously the other elements are extremely important as well. I don't want to downplay the work of actors like Bob Odenkirk and Jonathan Banks on Better Call Saul, or Michael McKean, which is plays Saul's brother, who plays like a sick role too, really dope role. But the way it's written, the way Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould write this stuff, and obviously the writing team, but the way they plot out their stories, and it's just so fucking awesome. You're so into it, and this season was very. It doesn't let you down at all, and it keeps you in it, and you're waiting each and every episode. You're waiting like to see when Jimmy McGill turns into Saul Goodman, and what the fuck is it that's going to make him turn. And part of me, like when spoiler alert, when his brother falls and hits his head in the copy place, and the show just ends like that on that cliffhanger, you think, you know, maybe his brother dies, and then out of the guilt he changes his name and fucking flees or something like that. But that doesn't happen. And then the way it ends with the brother kind of conning Saul and catching him in his lie and making him confess and stuff like that, and then getting it on tape and all that, the way he pulls all that shit off, and that sick dynamic love-hate relationship that they have. And it's like his brother is not a bad guy at all. He just kind of like resents him. He resents Jimmy, and or not him. Well, he does resent him, but he resents the fact that more so I think that people love him, and when they shouldn't, because he's not a good guy. And he is kind of like, even though his heart is like in the right place, he doesn't do the right things. And whereas the brother's more of like a straight arrow kind of guy, and did everything like by the book, and feels that he should be getting that type of like love and admiration, which he does get, but only in his professional career, but nowhere else. So it's such a deep characters, both of them, and the show just ended beautifully. And hats off to Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould for the way they write, and the way they inspire me to want to learn how to write, or want to be able to write one day. I will say this though, this is again complete and utter speculation, but where's the fun in watching shows like this if you can't anticipate or kind of like create in your own head where the show should go, or where you think it's gonna go, not where it should, because I wouldn't be that fucking vain. But you guys know those black and white scenes, like flashback type scenes, where they seem to show Bob Odenkirk's character, you know, whether he's Jimmy or Saul at that point, I don't know. I'm guessing he was Saul. because in one of those flashbacks he writes like on the wall, SG was here, Saul Goodman was here. He seems to be in some sort of like witness protection program in the middle of nowhere, USA, and he is miserable, obviously. And most people say that that's what happens after Breaking Bad, where he winds up when he like leaves and disappears at the end. And he went into witness protection basically. I have a theory, which is a little out there, but my theory of what those black and white flashback scenes are is that something happened to Jimmy McGill, not that makes him become Saul Goodman, but that makes him have to go into this witness protection. While he's in this witness protection program, he is so miserable that he creates this Saul Goodman character and finds some sort of legal loophole in being able to, change his name and his identity and retain his whatchamacallit, his fucking lawyership, ESQ-ness, fucking bar exam accolades or whatever, and still be a lawyer basically, but change his name into being Saul Goodman. And that's why he writes SG was here, because that's a seminal moment in that point in time of the character where he decides, okay, I'm Saul Goodman, but I'm leaving this shit behind, this witness protection shit. Now I'm Saul Goodman, and I'm gonna go and be my Breaking Bad self. That's what I think that black and white shit is. We shall see when and if that is true, or if that prediction becomes true, I guess. Let me know what you guys think about that. Next. All right, so those are the two shows that I wanted to mention. House of Cards, you guys can watch that shit on AMC. And House of Cards you can watch on Netflix. And Better Call Saul is on AMC. Now, 3 movies that I've seen recently. Barbershop 3 that I saw in the movie theater. I had absolutely zero interest in seeing this movie when I heard that it was coming out. I had never seen Barbershop 2, except that it was on TV the other day because, they're promoting Barbershop 3. So they play, when new movies come out, they start playing fucking the old ones on TV. Barbershop 1 I saw and I liked, and I thought was funny. It was a cool movie, but I was never really that into watching Barbershop 2, and I never did until, like I said, the other day when it was on TV, and I saw some of it, and it seemed okay. Barbershop 3, I decided to watch because we were going to watch My Big Fat Greek Wedding, because my fiance loves that movie, and it wasn't playing at the theater that we go to, so we decided from the other movies that were playing, Barbershop 3 would be the one that we would go see, and I was down to go see it. Also, because I was definitely going to watch it, but I was thinking of watching it when it comes out, like on DVD or something, and not at the theater. But I was down to watch it because I saw Eve, which is Eve the rapper, Rough Rider chick that is in the Barbershop movies. And she did a recent, doing her, promotion and press for the movie, did a recent Breakfast Club interview. I watch Breakfast Club interviews pretty frequently, and she did one of them. And the way she described the movie and how she said she wasn't even really interested in doing it, but the way that they wrote her character, and her character was like about something now, and kind of like grew as a character. She decided that she was down to do it, etc. And then I spoke about the comedic elements of the movie and how they address or do their best at addressing the violence going on in Chicago now, with all the killings and gang violence and stuff like that. I thought it would be interesting to watch the way she described it. So good job on selling me on that, Eve. And who's now married to like some billionaire fucking British designer dude or something like that, which is weird. And she's like spoke about that, not weird, whatever, but it's just unexpected, I guess. And she spoke about, living in London now, and she's helping raise her stepkids and stuff, and it's weird coming from EVE. But it's dope. And the movie, I really liked it. I laughed a lot. I fucking got emotional at fucking some points in time, which I wouldn't expect from a fucking Barbershop movie. And but I'm a little bitch when it comes to certain scenes and certain relationship dynamics within movies. And it was a really good movie. I enjoyed it and recommend it for you guys to check it out also. And check out that Barbershop interview with Eve, which, if I'm not mistaken, my midday Monday morning boost letter, which I've told you fucks to sign up for. Some of you have, which you can sign up for at spuntoday.com/subscribe, is a once weekly letter that I send out, and I put 5 things on there: a picture of the week, a video of the week, a podcast of the week, a quote of the week, and a word of the week. And the video of the week for, if I'm not mistaken, last week's Midday Monday boost letter, or this upcoming Midday Monday boost letter, which you get midday on Monday, every Monday at 12 p.m. The video of the week is the actual interview with Eve and the Breakfast Club. And I thought it was just a dope interview in and of itself, aside from the movie promotion part, which got me to watch the movie. I thought it was an interesting interview in this, just to see the I don't want to say the growth of Eve, but just her as a person now, from the Rough Rider DMX days, where I enjoyed her music, to see where she's at now. It's just interesting to me, and she seemed like a cool chick, and it was a cool interview that I laughed in and enjoyed. So that became the video of the week for the Midday Monday boost letter. Check it out. Check out the movie. Next, Deadpool. I saw last night. Shout out to Raul and Judy. Saw it at their crib with my girl, and it was very unexpectedly good, to be honest. I like Ryan Reynolds, by the way. I enjoy his acting. I am actually probably the one person in the world that I've ever, amongst the people that I've ever spoken to or mentioned, that actually liked the Green Lantern movie. And I like his sarcastic style of comedic acting. And I don't know, I fucking like his movies. And Deadpool, I didn't want to see. I didn't even want to see it. It was like one of those movies where I was like, I don't really ever want to see that. But, unfairly never giving it a shot type of thing. Because the way it was promoted was just so fucking weird. It was like up for comedy awards, and if my girl told me that it won like action choreography scene, fighting scene awards, stuff like that. So it's like an action and a comedy, but it was also being promoted. It came out on Valentine's Day. It was also being promoted as a love story, and it's like all those things like don't go together, right? You would think they don't go together, but they did in this movie, and it was interesting. And I really loved the aspect of the fact that it's a Marvel movie, but it wasn't made for, not made for kids. You know what I mean? Like, not made in the PG-13 fashion. Like, it's very gruesome, which was cool. It's a shitload of cursing from a quote-unquote superhero, and which you don't expect, which was pretty dope. It's sexual. It's grown up. It's like a grown up fucking Marvel movie, and I enjoyed it a lot. And there was a love story in there, which was cool. And it was a good movie. I fucking enjoyed it. Check it out if you guys had any doubts in watching it, similar to mine. You should watch it. And last but not leastly, Concussion. Will Smith should have absolutely been nominated for an Oscar for this movie. I am officially going on the record in saying that. At first, without seeing the movie, the whole Oscars to black thing, Oscars to white thing, which stems from, I think, it's like a systemic thing. It's not necessarily that the people in Hollywood now are racist or purposely leave out blacks and Latinos from certain prestigious to them awards or whatever, which is not the last. Rappaport says this all the time. The last 2 years, a Mexican dude won the Director of the Year type of thing, but no black actors that could have been nominated were nominated. And people say, okay, so well, it's just happens to be that there's more white people acting, which could be an issue that could be looked at, or should be rather. And in my opinion, it's more like if you have a whole bunch of old white dudes picking movies, then a whole bunch of old white dudes are going to pick the type of movies that a whole bunch of old white dudes like to watch. And it's kind of like, duh, you know what I mean? So it's like systemically comes from that, and it's not necessarily from a place of racism, or although it could be. I would say more like institutionalized, if anything, or if at all. But it's just coming from a place where old white dudes pick old white dude shit. You know what I mean? If it was the Latin Grammys, or I don't know, that's probably a bad fucking analogy, but you're gonna get a bunch of Latin shit. You know what I mean? So anyway, people say who could have been nominated then that was black, and people have said Will Smith for Concussion. People have said Idris Elba for Beast of No Nation, which I haven't seen yet, and maybe I'll watch it tonight, actually. Sounds like a good idea, because I've been meaning to watch it, and that movie is a Netflix original movie, and Netflix is a shit, so I want to check that one out for myself. But Will Smith should have absolutely been nominated, because I've seen most, if not all, of the movies that were up for like movie of the year, and including Damn That Danish Good Girl. Shout out to Tracy Morgan. Yeah, Will Smith absolutely is. I don't know. He gets flack, I think, for being from some people just for playing like the same type of role in every movie. Like he's saving the world in every movie. Men in Black, he saved the world. Fucking I Am Legend, he was the only person in the world and saving fucking human civilization. Independence Day, saved the world. Like he plays that type of role. You can say that about a lot of actors. Fucking like Denzel, which is not even arguably is one of the best actors ever. Always plays that confident, I got swag in G type of fucking role. You know what I mean? Like he plays that confident, I own the room type of role in his movies. And Will Smith has in my opinion, an uncanny ability, and I'm biased because I've been a fan of Will since fucking The Fresh Prince and since day one. And to see him grow like this as an actor is, like, to me, amazing. But in my opinion, he has the ability to be so good at the roles that he plays that you forget it's Will Smith. You know what I mean? In my opinion. And he did that with Ali, which I saw recently for the first time. I hadn't seen it before. I know I'm mad late on that one. But he did that in this role too, in Concussion, of the doctor that he portrayed, which is based on a true story, by the way, for those of you that don't know, and the controversy of the NFL trying to suppress information about concussions being bad for the players and the effects that they're having on players, and players fucking going crazy and killing people and shit like that. Or, you know, hurting themselves. They didn't kill people, hurting themselves and their families, and just going nuts and dying early from the effects of concussions. And he played this role so well that I forgot it was Will Smith playing it. Like, throughout many points in the movie, I was like, oh shit, that's Will Smith. And one of the biggest criticisms also of the movie is, which was a critique of mine even, just from what's his accent, from listening to the commercials of how they promoted the movie, which again is another movie that was promoted in a way that wasn't good promotion. I think just like Deadpool, it didn't want to make me see it. It made me want to not see it, actually. And Concussion, I just wanted to see it off the strength of Will Smith, and the fact that it was based on a true story, and I like stories like this about industries that are into like some sort of fuckery and how they get exposed, kind of thing. But I thought the same thing as most people when I saw the commercials for the movie, and I was like, damn, that accent is horrible. Like, it sounds really bad, like that African accent that he has. And that's how it came off in the commercials. And some people were like, oh, well, because he's a black guy and he did an accent, he deserves an Oscar. And no, he deserves an Oscar because he's a fucking amazing actor. And he made you, the point of acting to me, or the point of watching film to me, or movies, I don't want to sound douchey saying film, but is because you get, or reading a book or listening to a song or any type of art, you get immersed in the world that is created for you. And if you're watching a movie of one of the most well-known actors in the world and you're so immersed in it, in the story and in his acting, that you don't even remember that it's him playing it, he did his job in spades. And just back to the accent thing, I've worked with a dude from Africa, from Nigeria, and he sounded exactly like the dude, which he didn't sound like in the commercials. So in the commercials, it sounded like he was doing a bad accent. When you watch the movie, his accent is spot on African dude fucking accent, and it doesn't sound like a fake, made up, forced accent at all. And I thought of this dude that I worked with for years, and my fiance actually told me the same thing. She worked with an African guy in the past as well that has I think from Nigeria also, if I'm not mistaken, that had like that same exact accent, and it was spot fucking on. Just his ability to do that in and of itself is like dope, you know what I mean? But yeah, it was a great story. What a heroic fucking doctor to go up against the NFL like that. Like part of it, you want to say is naivete to take on behemoth fucking, that's the word of the day, I guess, behemoth fucking organization like the NFL, a fucking country's institution like the NFL, and part of it is just balls and knowing that when you're right, and you fight for what you believe in. And it's a really dope story. I recommend it like crazy. Will, you got an Oscar in my book for whatever that's worth. And that's pretty much it, folks. That is the episode for this week. The Random Rant episode number 46 of the Spun Today podcast. I really appreciate the fuck out of all you guys. Thank you very much for listening. And just to do some house cleaning real quick, you guys should definitely check out something that I've done a couple of right now, which is using Viral Style. viralstyle.com/spun today. I made a couple t-shirts. It's just to fuck with it, just to try out the website, the way it works. I really like what they're doing. It's especially for like guys like me or like any other podcasters out there. If you guys are listening, it's worth checking out. You could design, it's not some like Ralph Lauren shit, but you could design your own t-shirt online and with your podcast logo or a catchphrase or whatever, design your own t-shirt with whatever the fuck you want on it and sell it pretty much through their website. They take a pretty bulky cut, but you literally don't have to do anything besides design the shirt and promote it. If you sell any, you get a cut. If you don't sell anything, you don't, you get a cut of 0, which is 0. But you don't get penalized or anything like that. You don't have to buy anything up front. And so far, it seems pretty dope. So definitely check it out. viralstyle.com/spun today. I did. Oh, and it's by promotional period, kind of. Or what that means, rather, is you design a shirt, you could sell it for 7 days or 10 days or whatever it is, whatever you decide on. And once that window ends, that's it. You could design it again and put it back up, or, try a different design. But yeah, there's like that countdown feature to it. And, yeah, check it out. People buy it. It gets directly shipped to the customers, and you get your percentage based on how many you sell, and et cetera, et cetera. The site explains it to you. Check out viralstyle.com/spun today. And I think I have one going on right now, which is a create t-shirt. It says create in the front, but it says create phonetically, like how the dictionary spells it, with the KRA apostrophe T line over the A, to, like shit like that, the way it looks in the dictionary. And in the back, it says your dreams with an arrow to the left, everything else with an arrow to the right, and then like a stick figure guy walking towards the left. And under that, the catchphrase of this podcast in very, very tiny letters that you probably have to squint to look at, but it kind of looks like a floor under that a stick figure guy, which I designed it like that way on purpose. But because it's a super ass long catchphrase, which is substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So check it out. You guys might like it, and use a promo code. This is a promo code which is not my own, obviously, but whatever. If it saves you guys money and it helps promote another podcast, which I'm a fan of, which is no secret, Rogan's podcast, then so be it, right? Why not? It's a win-win. Coupon code Rogan, ROGAN, will save you guys 10% if you guys want to check out my t-shirts or any other t-shirts on there. Aside from that, whatever, check out my website, spuntoday.com. You can check out the affiliate links page there, and shop on Amazon and iTunes through any of my links on there. I'll get a cut of that stuff and would appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Spun Today. Check out the Tumblr page, spuntodaypodcast.tumblr.com. If you guys are into that kind of stuff, subscribe to my YouTube page where all these podcasts go up for free as well. And what else? Rate and review on iTunes and Stitcher. That helps the podcast gain in popularity. Other people get exposed to it just because it moves a little bit. It inches its way up the charts. You know what I'm saying? And that would be dope if you guys would do that for me. On iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite pod catchers like Pocket Casts. Google Play, I hear, has its own embedded podcast catcher on there. And if you guys can find it, let me know how, because I don't know how to figure it out. I have an iPhone, but I downloaded the Google Play app, which I had a long time ago from just for music purposes, but have not been able to find the podcast area. Anyway, that's the episode, guys. As always, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. And thank you very much for listening.